Good afternoon or good morning. I am so grateful to be here, and I don't use that term lightly just because the title of my talk is gratitude. Truly am grateful to be here, not just in this physical space, but in this moment in time in Florida, not just because Florida is beautiful and it has palm trees, and who doesn't love that, but I'm grateful for this life. Because just a few weeks ago, maybe a week or so ago, on a day much like today, shining, beautiful, the palm trees swaying in the wind, a woman got up from her bed, mother of 11 children, cancer survivor ×2, got out of bed that morning as if it were her usual Saturday morning, had her breakfast, probably had her lunch, and was excited to spend the day with her son. And just a happy person, full of gratitude for life, having survived cancer and so many other challenges in her life. She was full of gratitude. But much like the rest of us, we never know when it is our time to be called back to the spirit realm, whether through tragedy or through consequence or through disease or from some other form. We just never know. And that mother for sure and that son did not know that day that they would go to a nightclub, and that mother in a split second made a decision that any mother would do and would stand in front of her son to take 2 bullets for him and die so that he could live. This actually happened at Pulse nightclub. This is a true story that happened to Deborah Lee Marquez McCool. And her son and relatives sharing this story and how much this has affected not just her family, but her community, the amount of gratitude they now feel for every second of every moment of every day, not taking that for granted, and reevaluating why we live such a dichotomous lifestyle sometimes, why sometimes we feel like we want to live a spiritual life, yet there's something else that pulls us in a different direction sometimes. And sometimes there's where that inner conflict comes from, where you feel like something's missing. Gratitude is truly a therapeutic tool. It shifts our mindset from what is not important to what is, from the real meaning. If you go on Netflix and you watch, you can pull up any type of documentary of different cultures from around the world. There are people in different areas in the world who live very simply, and that is their life. In Bhutan, you can Google this, it's a place, they say it was measured to be the people that live there are one of the happiest people in the world. And when you look at how they live, you wonder what are they grateful for? They have nothing, really. So it warrants us to rethink and reanalyze our lives and what is our purpose here? What am I living for? But have we ever felt that sensation like, I need something more? God bless you. Have you ever felt that when you kind of stayed away from your church or your spiritist center for a while, you kind of felt like you needed something? Or perhaps you came here today for the first time, or maybe this is your millionth time here, but you feel like, I need some sort of nourishment. That actually comes from a place within us, from the depths within us. In the Gospel according to Spiritism, they tell us in chapter 16, item 10, this actually is this incessant desire to be better. It's a desire that drives us to seek out means of improving our situation. After physical nourishment, humans need spiritual nourishment. Abraham Maslow showed this to us many decades ago in his little upside-down pyramid, where he basically said, well, after that physical nourishment, after you can breathe and you get food and you feel safe, once you climb up this ladder, you begin to need much more. That's why sometimes in first world countries we have so many emotional problems, because perhaps in other places in the world they're just trying to deal with being safe every single day. But this is what drives us. We all have this incessant desire. That's why there are people out there in the world that feel emptiness, that despite the fact that they have $1 million homes or not even $1 million homes. Sometimes they have, a $200,000 home, but they have a lot of things and they feel empty. This is the reason, because we are meant to connect with the divine. And today, these are just some of the books that I've gotten, some of my references today. And some of the questions I'm going to be touching on today. Who am I? What am I? Where am I going? We're going to define gratitude. What does gratitude mean to me? How can I practice gratitude or show gratitude? I want to just take 30 seconds for you all just to think about this in your mind. If I could give you a piece of paper and have you write it down, what does gratitude mean to you? The definition. What is it? Many of us might think, well, gratitude is saying thank you to someone. If someone goes out of their way, I make sure I let them know that I'm grateful for them. And how can we practice it every day? Is it an actual action? Is it an actual action? Do I need someone else to be able to practice it? Can I practice it myself? Can I get up in the morning and write in a journal? Or just proclaim out loud, I'm thankful for this day. I'm thankful that I woke up and my eyes work. I woke up and my 2 legs work. I'm glad I woke up this morning. I'm glad for that. Something for us to think about it. But as we begin to understand gratitude, kind of go back to some of its original meaning as well. It's from the Latin gratus, meaning grateful, or gratia, meaning grace. It was first found to be used in 1523. It means the state of being grateful, thankfulness. Joanna defines gratitude also as retribution for goodness or favor that one incurs for restitution, at least in part. Instinct of self-preservation, stimulated towards pleasure. So what that means is that we have this feedback mechanism within us. So we like that sensation to be gratified. That's why sometimes we get into trouble a little bit in our society, because we like that instant gratification. And somehow in our evolution, that's kind of necessary. We have these feedback mechanisms because if we didn't have them in place, you probably wouldn't eat. You might not exercise, you might not procreate, and do many other things that are really good for us that we need to maintain. So on some basic level of our evolution, we are sort of wired to eventually reach a higher state, sort of a basic gratitude. But Joanna tells us in this lovely book, where primarily I'm sharing the ideas from, she says evolved gratitude. It's much deeper, it's more significant, a more significant sentiment. It's not limited to a casual reward mechanism. It has a psychotherapeutic character to it. It's a noble sentiment. It characterizes a psychologically mature individual. Grateful people are always happy and live fully. Our favorite story is a story of a Buddhist monk. He's walking along this little trail with other monks. And as they're walking, if you've ever seen a documentary or movies about monks, they're rather pensive and kind of quiet as they walk. So they're quietly walking along, and they're walking past a little riverbed, and one of the monks noticed that there was a scorpion, and the scorpion was trying to get out of the water, but it wasn't able to. So just naturally, one of the monks goes over, scoops the scorpion in his hand out of the water, and begins to bring him over to the grass area. And during that interval, the scorpion bites the monk. And out of instinct, the monk flings him back into the water. And then the other monks, mind you, are watching this whole scene. And as the monk flings him back into the water, he has a reaction again and grabs a stick, gets the scorpion out again, and brings him back over to the grass, lands the scorpion in the grass, and the scorpion scurries off. And then he goes back on the path with his other monk friends, and they're all kind of just staring at him for a second, and then they start walking. But one of the monks in his little group was very curious and wanted to ask him a question, and he said, "Can I ask you something? Why, when you got the scorpion out of the water the first time and he bit you and you flung him back, why did you go back and get the stick and help it again? I mean, obviously this is a horrible animal. You should have let it drown because it doesn't help anybody anyway." And And he said, well, that's the scorpion's nature. I did my best, and he's doing the best of his ability. I don't see what the problem is. So there he was trying to teach us something more profound. This feeling of gratitude for life. Life is beautiful. It sounds idealistic, but it is an actual thing to be obtained. And this little story can really be applicable to our day-to-day lives when we're dealing with the scorpions in our lives that are very ungrateful, that bite the hand that's feeding them. The idea is, the psychology behind that is that it doesn't matter if someone bites you. You're going to do it anyway, because doing good is the right thing to do. Not always is it a natural feeling. A lot of things that we should be doing is not natural. I'll give you an example. If you see a piece of, okay, let me go back a little bit. Who likes chocolate? Okay. Who likes vanilla? Okay. Who likes ice cream? Okay. So let's just pretend we got vanilla, chocolate, and all kinds of goodies here on the table. But then over here I have fruit. And I have kale, chips. And I just leave it here. It's highly probable that most of the ice cream and cookies will be gone. And it's highly probable that the kale chips won't be touched. And the fruit will probably rot if I leave it there. Because we condition ourselves to make choices that aren't always the best, in excess, of course, because a little bit of ice cream never hurt anybody. Unless you're a diabetic, then, consult your physicians, please. But because we have the habit sometimes of making decisions that aren't the best for us, but because sometimes we don't notice that they aren't the best for us, we keep doing it. Until we reach a level where we're in so much pain, such as disease or other forms of pain, and then we begin to think again, much like the son of Deborah Lee, who probably prior to that day, he had a very good relationship with his mother. But after that, the immensity of gratitude he will feel beyond his own death will be for the rest of his very existence. The gratitude for someone so selfless. So gratitude truly is an emotional experience. It's unparalleled to anything else. For those of you who don't know my professional background, I've been a nurse for about 8 years. I've experience in the intensive care unit and other areas of healthcare that it's irrelevant at this moment. But the few years that I spent in the intensive care unit had some pretty impactful experiences, one of which I will take to my grave and probably to the great beyond. It was an elderly woman, probably in about her 70s, and she had metastatic breast cancer that was pretty much in every area of her body. And for those of you who don't know how it works with nurses, generally you work shifts. So when one shift is leaving, the next shift is coming on, you give each other reports. So in report, you're basically just hearing about your patient or what patients you're going to have that day. So of course, when I'm hearing about this 75-year-old woman, end-stage cancer, no hopes for any cure or anything, she just was there to transition to go home. And because the other beds on the other floors were full, sometimes we got the overflow, which was fine. So, and her curtain was closed, so I didn't get a chance to take a quick glance at her before I heard about her, which I had a habit of doing that, walking on the floor to see who my patients were. When I finally had the opportunity to go into her room, it was like I entered an alternate universe. The energy was unreal. And for those of you who are sensitive to vibrations and energies, perhaps if you were there that day with me, you would have been able to feel it because it was tangible in the air. When I walked into her room, shockingly, because most of my patients are on machines and all types of things to keep them alive and things like that, so she was just seated in a chair, knitting and humming some sort of hymn. So I walk into this, and this is the scenario for me. So I go in and do my usual nurse thing that I do. And talking to her a little bit as I'm doing what I need to do. And then I proceed to leave the room because I have nothing else I need to do with her. My curiosity was screaming at me to ask her a few questions because I was curious. And I said to her bluntly, I said, "Ma'am, can I just ask you a question because I'm very touched by your disposition." I said, I see here on my sheet that you have metastatic cancer. And that you had this for a while and this is your second bout with it. And I said, I'm sorry, but I just can't help but notice that you're smiling and you're singing and you're knitting. So one doesn't seem like, the picture doesn't seem to correlate with what I think should be happening. So she laughed and said, "What did you want me to be doing, crying?" I said, no, I'm surprised. And she said, "I'm grateful for every breath that I take. I think that God has given me so much life. I've lived it, and now's my time." And so I said, "Well, what are you knitting?" And she said, "Oh, I'm knitting because my church, we donate for this, that, and the third." I said, "Oh, that's wonderful." And I continued on this conversation with her, and she taught me something about gratitude that day. Because sometimes we have to experience it through someone else to see and feel it for ourselves, just as Deborah Lee's son did that day, and many others who watched CNN. Thousands of hundreds of people that day looked to their loved ones and said, "I'm grateful for you. I'm so glad that I'm here today," and really have been rethinking their lives. Many people have left comments online, if anyone's ever had the opportunity to go and see, that they are rethinking their priorities in life and how much they have to be grateful for. So gratitude is much more than a thank you. Although Joanna DeAndres in this book talks to us about that it's normal in the early stages of development, of our development of understanding gratitude, that we feel this necessity of like, wow, I'm doing so much, but I'm not getting back. Sometimes moms can feel that way, dads can feel that way, siblings can feel that way, wives, husbands can feel that way. Oh, I'm doing so much, I'm not getting it back. On our evolutionary path, the early stages, it's normal. We should not be upset at ourselves that we're not, at some higher level to be able to give like this monk did. If there's one thing I can tell you today, don't go home expecting to be like that monk. To be able to give, and allow the scorpions to bite you all day long, and then you be okay. Because that level takes a lot of practice to get to that point. Just like if you say, well, I want to be like Michael Phelps. He's a fantastic swimmer and I want to be in the Olympics. That's good. It's good to have goals. Everybody should set goals for themselves. I'm not just talking about a professional level, on a spiritual level, all across the board. We all need to have a set of goals for our lives, independent of our age, what we've been through, doesn't matter. But you really can't anticipate to be a Michael Phelps if you've never even swam before and you just started to swim. At best, you'd be lucky if you just don't drown in the water, and that's okay. Self-acceptance, Joanna teaches us, don't be so hard on yourself. You just started swimming. Maybe you gotta wear those floaty things. That's okay. Don't be embarrassed. We shouldn't be embarrassed or ashamed of how we feel. We should acknowledge it, accept it, understand it, and move on. On to the next one. There's a really good true story in this book by Dale Carnegie, How Not to Worry. And he gives an account that's not his own, but of someone who wrote to him, and he had the permission to tell the story, and I'm going to share it. A professor at a university gathered all of his students on the first day. And for those of you who've ever been to a biology lab where they have these huge steel sinks, this professor got a large glass of milk, put it on the side of this steel sink, and all of his students are looking at him and looking at the glass of milk. And once there was silence in the room, he took his hand and knocked over the milk, shattered in the sink. Milk, glass everywhere in the sink. And the students, some of them are laughing, some are like, this is an insane professor, this is going to be an interesting semester. And he just said very few words. He said, don't cry or worry over spilled milk. It's done. Move on. Clean it up and do better. That is the same idea that we should apply to our spiritual lives, the work that we do on ourselves, how we view ourselves, the things that we've done in the past or even currently. It does us no good to feel guilt. Guilt has no purpose. The acknowledgement that, okay, that probably wasn't the best thing I ever did in my life. I probably could have done better, and I'm gonna do better. That serves a purpose. Acknowledgement serves a purpose. Gratitude serves an even greater purpose. All who are grateful, who truly understand the significance of real gratitude, enjoy physical, emotional, and psychological health, content in sharing things, content in sharing themselves. I could bet you all of my life savings, all of what's in my 401k at this very moment, that if you take a journal, you go home for the next month or just for 1 week and begin to write down 1 to 2 things every day that you are grateful for, and in a separate journal, begin to take note of how your emotions are changing. And I guarantee you, you will feel like a different person. The people around you, the world that you live in, will begin to look differently. Because gratitude truly is a psychotherapeutic tool. But we become very hung up sometimes about this word ingratitude. And in the Spirit's book, question 937 says, ingratitude is a child of selfishness, and selfish individuals will sooner or later encounter hearts as hard as their own. Think of all those who have done more good than you, who are more worthy than you, and who have been repaid with ingratitude. We don't even have to share how many stories of ingratitude. We've all known people, or even ourselves, that we've done plenty of good to that one sibling or to that one cousin or that one friend that you've given so much to and does nothing back in return. Again, that's a normal feeling, but the idea is that you're going to give without expecting back. That the art of giving and the art of being grateful for life is to be able to share without expecting back. That is the goal, albeit difficult to understand or difficult to achieve, but that is the real goal. But we would be remiss and not to mention any science behind gratitude, because there is a legitimate science. This isn't just spiritism, this isn't just philosophy. There is a whole science of gratitude and millions of dollars of research that has been poured into gratitude research, because universal truths, they exist everywhere. They exist in the farthest reaches of the earth to our end of the earth, in every religious arena, in every belief system. In the Genesis, it teaches us spiritism and science complete each other. Science without spiritism is completely unable to explain certain phenomena solely by means of the laws of matter. Spiritism without science would lack support and control. So allow me to share with you this great researcher, Dr. Robert Emmons. We could say that he's a pioneer in gratitude research in his field. And you can actually Google him and see and go to his website. He has so much that he has done in regards to research. And one of the things that he found was this, that those who kept a gratitude journal on a weekly basis, exercised more regularly, reported fewer physical symptoms, felt better about their lives as a whole, and were more optimistic about the upcoming week compared to those who recorded hassles or neutral life events. Children who practice grateful thinking have more positive attitudes towards school and their families, and more likely to report having helped someone with a personal problem or having offered emotional support to another. So when we practice gratitude, there actually is a science completely behind it that we're still learning about. But we know through Joanna, it changes our mental landscape. We begin to observe things about ourselves that we hadn't observed before, things in our body, how we physically feel. That it's just sort of one thing leads to another. It's kind of like when you decide to be healthy. You say, okay, well, I'm not going to eat as much ice cream. I'm going to try out this kale chips business. People talk about kale a lot. And fruit. So you begin to do that, and then you begin to kind of feel like, you know what? I think that I should do a few other things. Maybe I'm going to walk on a daily basis. And then you begin to, it's a ripple effect that begins to happen when you do one small thing. We talk about gratitude, and sometimes it feels like people don't appreciate gratitude and what it can do for us. It's the same with prayer in our lives. It's the most simplest, free tool we can use in our lives, but seldom, let's be honest, do we really use it unless you're going through a hardship in your life. And in that case, you might be doing it quite frequently, and maybe on your knees with tissues in your hand. But if everything's okay, we might not be utilizing, we might not be thinking about that. Dr. Robert Emmons also found that those who regularly attended religious services and engage in religious activities such as prayer, reading religious material, are more likely to be grateful. And grateful people are more likely to acknowledge a belief in the interconnectedness of all life and a commitment to and responsibility to others. Gratitude does not require religious faith, but faith enhances the ability to be grateful. These are not our words. This is just based on the research that he found. Some might say, well, in my experience in this, well, this is just the research that was done and we're sharing. We find it very insightful that we can think about it. But in terms of materialism, he found that grateful individuals place less importance on material goods. They are less likely to judge their own and others' success in terms of possessions accumulated. They are less envious of others and are more likely to share the possessions with others relative to less grateful persons. If you've ever experienced a real hardship in your life, I'm talking about something that really has shaken you to your core, and if you haven't experienced that yet, that's okay. Maybe you've just experienced little things. But if you've ever experienced something very trying for you, you know that your whole landscape changes. Things that were once important to you are no longer so important. Friends that you thought you really liked, you realize you don't like them that much for whatever reason. Things that you placed value on don't give you the same pleasure anymore for different reasons. Your whole mindset shifts because pain is second to the power of God, is one of the greater tools of our lives to teach us. It's often seen as something negative and as something that I don't ever want to experience. I just want to pop a pill to feel better, and that's it. We don't utilize pain as we should because it gets a negative rep when it's actually a part of our evolutionary path. We should just use it as a tool, as you would a hammer or any other tool that's in your toolbox. Joanna also shares a few other really inspirational and interesting things. For those of you who know a little bit about Joanna DeAngelis, and she is the mentor spirit guide of Divaldo Franco. And for those of you who have read her books, you know that she tends to we tend to endearingly name her sort of the spiritist psychologist, because all of her books sort of tend towards the emotion, psychology, the mind, which is much needed because we study a lot of philosophy, we study a lot of the gospel, but we need to introduce all of those things within ourselves. She tells us this: the blossoming of consciousness is a slow and continuous work, which is the challenge of the process of evolution, subscribing to God's laws in your heart, developing from within the concentrated effort of will as an essential goal of life. There are three things that we simply need to begin modifying our habits, because the modification of habits is how we educate ourselves, how we get better. It's desire, will, and discipline. Sometimes we only have one, which is desire. We kind of want to be better. We kind of look at other people and think, or we look at the Mother Teresa's or the Ho Teixeiras or the Divaldo Francos or the Chico Xavier's of life, or other people, whomever you admire, and you think, oh, how wonderful it would be to be like that, or how wonderful it would be to be so kind and do all those things, and we see the end result, but we don't realize how much effort it took to get there. So sometimes we just have the desire. Okay, so sometimes you have the desire and the will. So I have the desire, I want to do it, and I'm trying, but yet I keep falling flat on my face. I use the example of a diet because it's the most tangible, it's the most relatable thing. So for us, we might think, well, I want to get healthy because I have X amount of problems. I have arthritis in my left knee, so I just want to be healthier. My doctor says I need to be healthier. Fine. So the desire comes. But then the will is kind of difficult because, Joanna says that if you feel like your willpower is weak, do you know why it's weak? Do we know why that when we try to do something and people often say, man, I have no willpower whatsoever, or I have very little. Do we all know why that is? Someone can yell it out. It's not a rhetorical question. Someone can answer it.
Because we give up.
Because we give up. Okay.
Easier too.
Possibly.
Not confident.
Not confident.
Sabotage.
So it's very interesting, very simple. Joanna simply says, if you feel like your willpower is weak, it's because you're not practicing enough. Who here has ever lifted weights? Okay. So when you're trying to go from 5-pound weights to 20-pound weights to more heavier ones? And have you ever reached the point where yes, I'm lifting 20-pound weights each arm, and you do that for a matter of months, and then something happens, you get a new boyfriend, a new girlfriend, you kind of start working out, and you gain a little bit of weight, and then you try to go back to the gym, and you pick up those 20-pound weights, and your arms just flail down to the floor, and you might even pull something. It's because you've weakened the muscle. The muscle is weak. But when you go from 5-pound weights to 20-pound weights, you're building that muscle, you're building strength. It's the same with our willpower. You need to build it up. That's it. It's simple. There's nothing magical about it. It's just work on it. That's all. It seems so simplistic where it's kind of no. There has to be something else here. We have to dive deeper. No, it's really pretty simple. If your willpower is weak, it's because we're not practicing it. And the truth of the matter is that our growth it's slow. In the Spirit's book, they tell us that the amount that we grow in one lifetime is incremental. But don't be discouraged by that. We should be encouraged by that if you're not making huge leaps and bounds, it's okay. Work on what you can work on. Do what you can do. And be okay with that. And be grateful that you are self-aware enough to know that. One of the most beautiful things, before we get into St. Francis, is part 3 of the Spirit's book, the moral laws. Another thing I will bet on for you, that if you take the time out to study the entire Spirit's book, let's be honest, but part 3, the moral laws, when we begin to understand, there's something magical about the moral laws and understanding them. You begin to see how profound life is. So it warrants us to look more deeper in that aspect as well, to help us, for our consciousness to blossom. But one of the things that Joanna, to help solidify this idea of gratitude, if we're lacking in examples, which I don't think we are, is the example of St. Francis of Assisi. And the way she talks about him, and the way she recounts his story, how much gratitude he had literally for everything, that it seemed like St. Francis of Assisi, it sounds like he was some sort of Disney character that existed only on the movie screen. It's hard for us to fathom that there actually was a being on Earth that referred to the moon as Sister Moon and talked to the animals. It seems very Disney-like. It does, but it is an actual goal to be achieved. One of the things it warrants us to ask ourselves, and I'm going to ask you all, are we enchanted by life? What does enchanted mean? Do we know what to be enchanted by something? That it's magical. Who here wakes up every day and looks at their lives like a Disney movie, like it's just everything is enchanted? Does anybody? Seriously, does anybody wake up like that? I'm curious. I'm polling the audience. Okay. One person kind of says, a little bit? Okay, let's talk later. I'm curious. Do we feel it's precious? Do we feel our lives are precious under any circumstance? That is the big thing. It's very easy to be grateful when things are good. when your husband's doing what he's supposed to do, and your cat's acting as it should, and your neighbor's doing what you feel they should be doing, and everything is even keel, and you got the promotion that you wanted, and everything is just working out for you, and you're like, yes, I'm so grateful. But the true test is when everything is going wrong. Then ask yourself, do you still feel grateful? A couple of years ago when I think it was Hurricane Sandy hit New Jersey, there was one really interesting case that even the newscaster, the newscaster/journalist was interviewing one of the victims of Hurricane Sandy. I think it's Hurricane Sandy, right? Hit New Jersey, not so important the name. But a ton of people lost their entire homes, and their insurances didn't cover much or little to nothing. And one particular lady had said she was so happy to get rid of all that stuff. And the newscaster was like, "Ma'am, you're so happy?" And she said, "Yes, I'm happy. I feel alleviated that a weight is off my shoulder because all that stuff was weighing me down." And the look on the newscaster was like, "Well, there you have it, folks, here in New Jersey." And we who were watching it was like, wow, we thought a lot about that. What did she mean? She was happy that all of her stuff is gone, her car gone, like just water, all her stuff, and people around her, because everybody was, trying to help each other, and there were people in the background listening and were looking at her like, oh, she's bonkers. But it warrants us to think about, this woman was on to something. The gratitude that she said, I'm just happy that I'm alive and I have my loved ones and I'm good. I'm okay. We'll find a way. It's interesting because very few of us would probably say that. We like our car, and we should have respect for our things. And I'm not saying that to say that we shouldn't value, that we should just throw our stuff everywhere and, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm not a material person. Let me just throw this wherever. I'm going to leave my door open for all the burglars to walk in and steal my stuff because I'm not attached. No, we're not saying to be, like that. We should have respect for our things and to be grateful for that which we have and to use it accordingly, but not to be attached to it that when we lose it, we're going to go crazy. But do we feel enchanted by life? Do we feel it's precious under any circumstance? We need to ask, I want you all for all of us to ask ourselves this question. Legitimate gratitude, it demands that individuals be possessed of this inner sentiment of enchantment for life, tells Joanna. The sweet rapture that makes life precious under any condition by which it manifests, so that they may understand the magic of existence in realizing the gifts that multiply in countless expressions of exchange. Here in this particular text, she's referring to how St. Francis, how he expressed his gratitude. He was enchanted by everything. That was the amount of profound gratitude he felt, that it didn't matter what anyone did to him. It didn't matter the things that people said. He lived, his life was a hymn to gratitude. For the bad, for the good, the bad, and the ugly. That is the idea. But I reiterate again, if we have not reached that point yet, that is okay. We will all get there one day. Baby steps. Baby steps. Take it one day at a time. Just some take-home thoughts, because we always enjoy take-home thoughts. Just seems easier that way. When we had to go through physical therapy a number of years ago, and our physical therapist gave me 3 tips, and every time I saw him, he was always giving me tips. I said to him one day, I said, Frank, why do you always give me tips when I go home? Like, are you not doing a good job here? Like, what's the deal? And he said, no, actually, he said, research says that it's good that when you are helping someone, it's good to give them something to take home, to review, to work on, kind of like homework when you're in school. And I said, oh, okay. I'm just curious. I thought he did a wonderful job. So it's good even for us at Spiritus Centers, and even whatever religious arena we come from, to sort of have for ourselves some take-home thoughts. Like, what did I gain from today? What did I learn from today? Do I feel life is enchanting to me? am I grateful in every moment of my life, and how am I practicing it? And I would say out of those three, one of the single most important thing is how am I practicing gratitude? Because that question hopefully incites a desire to practice. Because if you ever open up the Gospel according to Spiritism, like the first, it's like the second page, there's like a little inscription. It's in very small letters. And it says something to the effect of the applicability of these teachings in our lives. I personally think that very few people read that small print. Because I have to admit, even for myself, up until a few years ago, I wouldn't even read the introduction of books. I have stopped that and began reading introductions. But it's so important because everything that's in this book, somebody spent time putting it there for us to read. And we believe that was put in there for us to understand that we need to find where the applicability lies for us. It's different for everyone. Perhaps you're at a different stage in your life. But how is it applicable to you? How can you go home today and practice that? How can I turn to my husband, wife, partner, daughter, sister, whatever? And the best thing, if you are currently undergoing a hardship with someone in your life, go home today on a piece of paper or just verbally out loud. Begin to think all the things you are grateful for. It might be like, I really have nothing to be grateful for. This person. Okay, you could say that spiel out loud and say, well, I really don't have anything to be grateful for. The person has always been a menace to society and a menace to me. Okay, you can let that out. Okay, but then begin to still think. Is there something, one thing, where you might say, well, because of this person, I was able to practice a whole lot of patience. That's something to be grateful for. I realized how good it is to feel, or how good it is to have true friends because of this person, because I realized what is not true friendship. That's something to be grateful for. Some of the take-home messages from Joanna we're going to share. Beyond simple speech, it is one's acts that should be considered as resources for human dignification. So it's not what we say, it's what we do. External peace starts within each one of us, so it is with gratitude, and so it is with gratitude. We should work on being the embodiment of peace and gratitude. Knowing ourself, know thyself. Begin to observe yourself, your habits, etc. Journaling or diary is the easiest way to achieve this. It's the most easiest and cheapest way. You can go home, go to your local dollar store, Dollar Tree, whatever you call it here in Maryland, and pick up that very simple, basic journal. It's often seen as something very feminine, and it's sort of a negative connotation sometimes men might have. They go, a diary is for girls. My little sister has that, or had that when she was 12. It's really not. It's for us as human beings across the globe. And be grateful in this moment right now for everything that we have. And the best time, through my own experience, is when you're enduring a hardship. It's the best time to practice it. And hardships and pain and suffering is such a bad rap because we hate it, we want to get rid of it, we seek out ways to fix it, and that's good, that's important, we should. But we also should shift our mindset a little bit and say, okay, we have a very good friend of ours who every time someone's going through something difficult, her motto is, and she tells people this, and thus I share with you, where is the lesson? What is the lesson in all of this? What is my purpose? And in that sense, we are giving a hymn of gratitude to God to say, I'm grateful for this life. Let me utilize it to the best of my ability. And so I leave you with those thoughts and those thoughts alone. And I hope and I pray that each one of you will go home today, including myself and Sarah, and we will continue to practice this, because each one of us, we vibrate an energy that kind of goes bigger and bigger and bigger, and it affects everyone in our city, then begins to affect everyone in our state, and affects other states, and it affects our world, and our world affects other worlds, and other galaxies affect other galaxies. I'm not just making that up. You can read more about that in the Genesis. They talk about that. So if we want a better world, as cliche as it sounds, it really begins with us. So I thank you so much, and God bless you.